Firstly, you should be aware that there is an ongoing war between the Turkish security forces and the Kurdistan Workers' Party's PKK guerrillas. People are being killed on the streets by unidentified murderers, and none of them was identified or arrested. Therefore, it is really risky and dangerous to travel in Kurdistan. There is a strong possibility that security forces will arrest or detain you if they see your travel visa issued by a Kurdish organization. Therefore, you should not show your visa to any Turkish official.
This had been a scary week, and now our bus had just been stopped by Turkish police. Everyone out, we're going to search your baggage. The uniformed Turkish officer was coming along the line. He would soon reach my baggage. Stuffed inside my sleeping bag cover was my safe passage document issued by the outlawed Kurds. If the Turks found it, we were finished. I had to do something now. Quickly looking to see if anyone was watching me, I put my hand inside the cover of the sleeping bag, pulled out that document, and then I stuffed it behind my belt, behind the back of my trousers. Then I looked up and I found that someone was watching. And while they watched, the piece of paper went down my legs back onto the ground. Place names, friends, are a record of history, and according to the place names in this area of eastern Turkey, the survivors from the Ark settled down here in a place which now takes the name the Valley of Eight, and more specifically the place of Eight. We look down now from the mountains of Ararat, very close to the Ark site, into the Valley of Eight. It's a wide, beautiful valley. Here we have the village of Kazan, known as the place of Eight. The village people tell us that they don't know how that name arrived, but it's a name that has existed from time immemorial. As you can see, this is wild, dramatic country. Very beautiful. Ron Wyatt came down to this village to explore. Across the road from the village were some very old deserted relics. You'll notice that the village down here has a road going past, and across the road there were some animal pens. There was the remains of an old house here, plus 2 grave markers and another building. And behind is a hill shaped like a cup facing you, with an altar, a giant altar across. Ron's 2 sons went exploring with him. "This looks like a grave marker," one of them said. "There's another here," exclaimed Ronnie, "lying on the ground in front of it. These must be grave markers." Ron had his camera running, and the inscriptions were unmistakable. But this they never expected, yet here it was in front of them. They didn't expect to be so favoured. It was happening. One discovery after another. A sequence of discoveries so breathtakingly rapid, Ron's mind was whirling. He had to mentally pinch himself. Could all this be true? Yes, the iconographs identified the graves. If the inscription meant anything, then what they had stumbled upon was, probably, dared they say it, the first post-flood grave markers on this planet. The 2 grave markers have the 8 cross symbols of Noah and his family above an ancient petrograph portrayal of one man's death on one marker and that of his wife on the other. And these grave markers were in the very front of an ancient stone house in the place of Eight. Below the rainbow, associated with the flood account, on the left was the crest of a wave, and atop the wave a boat. To the right of this were 8 stick characters. It was clear who they were: 2 older figures, male and female, accompanied by 3 smaller men and 3 women. Now, according to Genesis, the 8 human survivors of the great flood were Noah and his wife, their 3 sons, Shem, Ham and Japheth, and their sons' wives. Now, you'll notice something about the inscription. The woman had her head bowed. She was half crouching, her eyes were closed, and the other 7 are walking away from her. This lady had died. She must have been the first of them to go. Now, although we can't be certain, I think there could be evidence that Mrs. Noah's skin was more brown than this. The other grave marker bore the inscription of the man in death and the other 6 persons walking away from him. Here in the village of Kazan, there was a wall beside the village and faced with tiles. Along the wall there were pictures. I can't show these to you today because they have since been dismantled. But the first tile depicted animals entering the boat, depicted 8 people, other faces around, the ark riding on a wave, and then a God with water flowing from him at his feet. 8 people under a rainbow. Now, all of this was eventually broken up to be sold to tourists by the local village people after Ron had discovered it and found its significance. 1 tile ended up in a local villager's house. Let me ask, could you keep such a discovery secret? Ron was exploding. He wanted to shout it to the world. "That's incredible," gasped his colleague. "Simply incredible." The man was an Ark Search colleague. "Ron, I must see this." And trembling with excitement, Ron drove the man out to the village of Kazan. You might call Ron naive. He trusted that his friend would feel the same awe that had moved him, a reverence, if you like. Mehmet, the village mayor, looked both ways down the street, then yanked the visitor inside. The pact was sealed with a drink, and the visitor crept into the darkness and sped off with no lights. Within hours, the 2 graves were dug up. Several weeks later, the Turkish authorities contacted Ron. "Mr. Wyatt, do you know who could have done this thing?" These graves had contents which had been sold on the black market. In fact, one item was a bodice. The lady who was buried had this beautiful bodice round her waist with large stones, and it fetched $75 million on the Istanbul black market. Since then, the Turkish authorities have actually retrieved the sarcophagus, the coffin, from inside. It's now lying in a back room of the Ankara Museum, and it's of polished granite, 18 feet long. Now, I don't believe that this woman was that long, but we do believe these people were big, and possibly she was 12 feet or more. We've found much evidence in this area and around the world of 12-foot giants. As a matter of fact, before the flood, the Bible says people were giants, and they lived much longer in the special conditions that were changed after the flood. Recently I was out in Rotuma, an island in the Pacific, and out there are huge graves, and it's believed that 12-foot giants once lived on that island. The skeletons are in the graves. Soon after this, Ron and his 2 sons were sleeping in the same room, a room on the same floor that Trevor and I later occupied. And about midnight they were awakened with a great commotion. They looked out of the window, and here was a crowd of Kurdish people trying to get into the hotel. These people were after their blood. And very soon they had heard footsteps coming up the stairs. So Ron and his 2 sons quickly barricaded the door. They then placed a bed against the chest of drawers, and they heard a key in the lock. Then, as they tied sheets and blankets to go out of the window, they let themselves down 2 floors into another room and escaped for their lives down the street. This is not a place you'd go for a holiday. Sometime later, Ron and Alan Roberts and a few others were kidnapped as they were driving through the area. And they were the prisoners of the Kurds for 21 days. It was a very scary occasion. In fact, they felt eventually that their lives were going to be taken. and they had to make a determined effort to escape. That piece of news hit the world press. Here is the man that dug up the grave, Mehmet, the village mayor. This man was in league with another person on the ARC team, and the Turkish officials are now looking for that other man. But Mehmet was heard by Ron to say, let us take this man up into the hills and get rid of him. Ron, over his 34 times at the ARC site, had picked up quite a deal of Turkish, and he understood that he was the focus of this man's interest. So he and his taxi driver quickly cleared off, and Ron doesn't like going back there, I can assure you. When I let a few of my friends know that I was planning to get down to the village of 8, I wanted to check out these things for myself. Alan Roberts warned me on the phone, Jonathan, it's too dangerous. People disappear. It was now late 1993. Out there were some of the first anchor stones ever dropped from the Ark near this village. There the Noah family had built a house, we believed. They'd tilled the ground, and there finally Noah and his wife had been buried. This was the ancestral home of us all. Keep away from Kazan, urged Ron, they'll kill you. However, I decided to take all possible precautions. I'd grown to trust the one who, above all, takes care of us. I laid the matter before him. He knew my deep longing to record these things and to use them to vindicate his cause. It was now over to him. But I did take precautions, and speaking to the Kurdish people here in Australia, I eventually obtained from them a visa which would not be recognised by the Turks, and it's something that I had to keep out of sight if I went to Turkey. But this visa would give me protection, hopefully, if Kurds had any mind to kidnap me, and I pulled this out. I hoped, maybe foolishly, maybe naively, that this might protect me. So I took it with me. Meanwhile, Ron warned me. He said, don't stay overnight in Debayazit. This is the hotel where we were attacked by that group of people and had to escape. He said, when you fly into Turkey, into Istanbul, you fly across to a town here called Erzurum. At Erzurum, there'll be a taxi driver who you can trust. He's a tall man, and when you find him in the crowd, make a pact with him, and he will wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he'll drive you each day to the Ark site, back and forth, about a 5-hour journey. Don't by any means stay here overnight. And above all, don't go out to the village of Kazan. Even that taxi driver won't take you. He was with me when they wanted to kill me, and they would have killed him too. So as I made the trip into Turkey, I came off the plane here at Erzurum. I found the taxi driver, the tall grey-haired man. He said, I'll be with you shortly. And meanwhile, I waited. Very soon the crowd disappeared, and he was nowhere in sight. And in this town of 300,000 people, I felt sure I had lost him forever. So I said to my colleague Trevor, we're going to have to get here without this man. We can't trust anybody else to wake us up at 3 o'clock in the morning and take us to the Ark site each day. So the only safe thing is to go by bus and stay at Debayazit at the hotel where we're close to the Ark site, and we'll find some local way of getting there. So I went to the tourist bureau in Erzurum and I said, can you give me a road map of this area? They looked at me sideways, and shortly after that 2 big detectives came round to the hotel to look at our passports. We were asking for a road map in what was a war area. So there was not much hope of us getting that map. We took the bus, and the only way to go was by bus now. We felt we would find ourselves a man to take us up to the Ark site, a Kurdish man who knew the tracks well. So we took the little old bus across to the town of Debayazit, a 5-hour journey. And near Debayazit, the hills rise up here, and behind those hills, just about 5 kilometres up from here, is where the Ark site is. The town is down this way. The next morning, we came out of the hotel. I walked around the street, and by the way, that night I'd been praying hard. Trevor and I prayed that night and that morning. We said, Lord, we don't know how we're going to get up through this Kurdish country safely to the Ark site without somebody we can trust. will you please get us somebody that can speak English, that we can understand, whom we can trust, and someone we can feel safe to work with. So the next morning we walked around here, and I was talking to some Kurdish man who hardly understood English, and I was saying, do you know somebody here with a car who can speak English? And away down the other end of the block there was a man, I'm sure he didn't hear what we were saying, but this man called out, he said, can I help you, can I help you? He was a 26-year-old Kurdish man called Sayam, very, very fine chap. We became good friends, and he took us through the mountain villages. Lovely people up here, very simple living people. And from there we ultimately came to the Ark site and we commenced our work. And this is where Hassam, of course, sleeps, as we mentioned to you in a previous program. We came down here and started doing some work on the Ark, scraping away some of the mud on the sides. And ultimately, Siam and I became like brothers, very good friends. And then I showed him a picture of one of the anchor stones. Here we are scraping off the mud. This is Siam, this is Trevor. And in between the uprights we found that the mud was eroding away, and here were some of the upright ribs of the ship. Siam, I said, this is an anchor stone. And he said, tell me about that. So I explained what these old anchor stones were for. He says, tell me, where's this one? I said, this one's in the village of Kazan. Now that was the forbidden village that we had no way of ever reaching. And suddenly his face lit up. He said, Kazan, Kazan. He said, that's my mother's village. I'll take you there. Now I'd made a very strong point not of asking ever to be taken to this place. I knew how dangerous it would be. But I'd left it in the Lord's hands. If he wanted us to go out there, he would provide the way. Now here was the very man, the only man who possibly could ever get us in there safely. And I believe now that that unfortunate event of missing the Turkish taxi driver at Erzurum was something that was working in our favour, because now we got Siam, a local Kurdish man who came from the same village and could get us in. What a wonderful providence that was. Now the next morning we went out from, here's the Ark site, we went out from Debayazit and we started driving up this road. Mount Ararat's up here, and by the way, Turkish air pilots were bombing the mountain. We could see the smoke from the bombs. And we came up here, we turned off this road, and we turned just around here and we ran into a Turkish army convoy. You can see where we were headed. And we were arrested. Our passports were confiscated, and we were in custody for several hours. And Trevor nudged me, he said, hey, we're in real trouble. We could go to jail for life. This is dangerous stuff. Here's the military, we're in their hands. And here we are foreigners, we can't speak their language. They brought in one man after another to interrogate us. And eventually there was a report that they were going to go up to our hotel and look through our baggage. Now I should say, friends, that in that baggage I had that Kurdish travel safety visa, and if that fell into the Turkish hands, we were finished. So I inwardly prayed, Lord, don't let them go up to that hotel. Don't let them do that. Well, a short while after, the interviewer said, no, we're not going to go up to the hotel now. They brought in one final man to interview us, and I felt perhaps this was the time we had to take the initiative. So I thought, well, I'll interrogate him instead. So I said to him, where do you come from? He said, well, I come from the far end of Turkey. Oh, you must be missing your home, I said. Yes, he said, I hate being here. I wish we weren't doing this. How long have you been in the army? Oh, only 15 months. I have to go for 2 years. And so we began talking in this vein. And eventually he realised that we were no bad men, that we were not doing any harm in the area. So he said, look, when the governor wakes up, I'll ask him if you can be released. And so after a few hours he did. And we had to sign a document, however. It was in Turkish, and we had to trust that we were not signing away our lives. The document, we were told, said that if we were caught in the crossfire between the Turks and the Kurds, that we would not hold the Turks responsible. Well, straight after this we were released and we went back to the hotel. Now, by the way, you'll see this is a little out of focus. We'd given up taking pictures in this town in the street, so we took pictures now from moving cars. We consider this a dangerous place. And after a few hours inside the hotel, we waited, and then Siam came back and said, I've just been out to the village of Kazan to make sure that everything's safe. Let's go. So off we went. Here is the village, and we came in here, and on the way through, Siam stopped to pick up a man who introduced himself as the village chief. I looked at him and shuddered, and Trevor nudged me. This man looks sinister, doesn't he? The man gave another name, but he was Mehmet, the man against whom Ron had warned me. This was his deputy, and here's Siam, my dear Kurdish friend. The chief and his deputy took us up into the village, and they examined some of the anchor stones with us. Here's Siam in front of it. The village children began to take an interest after a little while, and we went up to an old cemetery where several anchor stones were still there, and they had been put up as tombstones, although originally they were the anchor stones similar to the others. Then after a little while of this, we went across to a hill about 2 kilometres to the west. Here we began walking, looking for more evidence and relics. There's the village back there, and here we come up the other hill. Now you'll notice holes in the ground here, and when I inquired why these holes were here, I found out that the village people had been digging up graves all around the valley, because since they had dug up Mrs. Noah's grave and found something, they were expecting they'd find treasure all over the place. And these people were notorious robbers. This village was not a good village. You won't see this very clearly on here, but there's a representation of the ark on this big stone. And here is an altar. The head was placed in here for the killing of animals. Now for an hour, Mehmet and another guided us over this valley of 8 to anchor stones, altars and inscriptions. But friends, my eyes were kept scanning for the spot I had really come to see. I wanted to see the grave sites, the sites of the old house, and so on. But at the hilltop here, we examined another one of the big anchor stones that was lying on the top, and I believe this had been dropped when the boat came over in a gentle arc up to the hills beyond, and these were lying in a fairly curving line up to the site. You'll notice that the hole has been broken off here. The hole is there, but the top of the stone has been broken off. Now we began to go back down the valley toward the village of Kazan. My eyes were being peeled, but I didn't want the Mehmet to know that I was looking for something else. We returned from that western hill, and back near the village itself, our hosts were knocking out stones from a wall to show us an old inscription. And Mehmet, by the way, brought out a book by David Fassold, a former member of the team. And he was very proud about this book because it had his own photograph in. And this book by David Fassold spoke a lot about the anchor stones. David, by the way, was a marine expert who had been working on the site. Now, this is Dave, by the way, and he's the author of that book. I knew that at this moment I had to make my move or never. I wanted to see the site of the grave that had this inscription on it. And the risk had to be taken. Dangerous it would be if the chief discovered what I really knew of Ron, himself, and the grave robbery. So better to feign ignorance, throw in someone else's name. So I sketched this out on a piece of paper, and swallowing hard, I said to him, "Have you seen this? Do you know where this might be? Is it anywhere around here?" "David Fassold saw this," I said. Mehmet instantly recognised it. Agitation showed in his face. "No, not David Fassold," he said. Then he paused, weighing his words. "On my land over here." I did not know it at the time, but this man carried a gun under his pocket. We skirted the area where I knew the gravestones and the house were. They were over this way. But we skirted right around here from the village to avoid that area, even though he said he was taking us there. And we eventually started climbing up the hill here. There is the big altar stone that you saw in my sketch earlier. And here is the amphitheatre hill, through which you can stand here and sound can be heard so far away. And perhaps the old patriarch stood here by the altar, and his descendants came and assembled from time to time when an animal sacrifice was made. Anyway, up on the hill, we came up to this altar, and we just kept on going. It's a 12-foot altar, by the way, with a step halfway up it. You can't climb it today, you can't step that high. You would have to be a 12-foot man to step on and then get to the top of it. But this was an altar no doubt used by people who were much bigger than us. So here we are, here's the altar. And we skirted that area and kept going. Up on the hill beyond the big altar, Ron had seen human bones up here and a skull with hair still on it, which dogs had been devouring. This man who was taking us up here now, Ron believed to be a killer. It was up the same hill that Mehmet was now luring me. How far is it, I asked. Oh, just 100 metres, he said. We kept on walking that distance. Then I said to Siam, look, we've come this far. How far is it now? He said, well, I'll ask him. Come, come, said the man. He wouldn't answer how far it was. And I kept on saying, now, how far is it beyond this spot? He said, come, come. And eventually, Siam pinned him down, and Mehmet said, oh, 1 more kilometre. Come. I recalled that plot to get Ron up into the hills there and get rid of him. So I quickly said to Siam, I'm going back. Now, I was behind the party being led up. So when I turned around, I was now in front. You can see the size of a person by that altar. And there's Trevor, by the way. He wasn't going to come up with us. And so I started turning back down the hill. And here we are looking back toward the village. And the area that I wanted to examine was over here. And there, by the way, is the ruins of the house. And the 2 gravestones were not too far away. And so I started walking straight across there. Now we're in the broad open, so Mehmet couldn't do very much. And I kept walking, snapping pictures as I went. Now here we have the house, what's left of it. And in front of here were the 2 gravestones. Now this house, I'll show you a sketch of the wall of the house. It's very, very interesting. The house was made of stone, and the window from the interior widened out as it went through that 3 feet of wall. So people inside could see a wide angle outside, but people on the outside could not see so well inside. It was very, very well built. Now this house, by the way, was now in about 4 feet of silt that had built up over the centuries, and the local people have been rummaging through this now and destroying part of the wall since we documented it to look for treasure and so on. They didn't realise the significance of all this until we started exploring around here, and now of course they've gone wild, these local vandals. However, as soon as I'd taken the pictures, I cleared out as fast as I could go, and we just went. Siam, Trevor and I went for our lives back to Debayazit, getting out of this Valley of Eight as fast as we could go. Mehmet had sometime in the past given to Bob Morrill, a member of our ARC team, this item from the House of Noah. It's part of a granite bowl, and the earliest dishes were of granite. About the same time as Mrs. Noah's grave was dug out, there appeared these bones. They were shown in the reception of the Erzurum Hotel. That's the hotel some of us have been staying at in Debayazit. And the receptionists showed a giant human jawbone so big you could just about put your head into it. It showed up about the same time as Mrs. Noah's grave was dug up, as I mentioned. Now, we know that the people back there were very, very big. Those that lived before the flood, were born in the antediluvian world, and who survived into the New World for a few hundred years. Long life, larger size was a predominant feature of mankind, and many large remains have been found, and we suspect that perhaps these are the jawbone of Mrs. Noah. We can't be sure, but it appeared about the same time. There's so much evidence from around the world now. And by the way, in my newsletter, which I'll mention in a moment, I bring out regular news of discoveries of giants around the world, ancient giants. Oh, now friends, about that baggage search. You might have been wondering, this is by the way one of the bags that I had with me when we were being searched. This has seen a lot of action, this old bag. Even the stitching is starting to come away now. But here we have the piece of paper that I stuffed down behind my trousers and fell to the floor. And in case you're wondering what that man did when he saw me, saw it fall to the ground, I think he must have been a Kurd, because he didn't tell the Turkish police that that had happened. Well, that's enough for tonight, friends, but I'd like to remind you that there are a couple of books that you'll find more information on these subjects inside. First of all, there's the Dead Men's Secrets books, which refers to the surprising discoveries of the ancient world. Sea floor, jungle and desert sands give up 1,000 forgotten secrets. Technology that vanished. This is the book Dead Men's Secrets, and I can recommend it. I wrote it after all. It's a very, very interesting subject for many people. And if you want to know more about the Ark subject, the scientific evidence, the arguments of the skeptics against it, the play, the counterplay of characters, the murder attempts, the phone tappings, the betrayals, and also the wonderful miracles that counterbalance that. The Ark conspiracy tells that story. In fact, we've just sold out of the first edition. There's a second edition coming off the press now. And finally, I do put out a quarterly newsletter, and the subscription price of this does help our expedition work. Also, we update various interesting discoveries that we're involved in and that others are involved in around the world. Anyway, friends, thanks for being with us. It's been good speaking with you, and I hope you found this enjoyable.
You've been watching a presentation by Jonathan Gray in the Surprising Discovery series. To receive regular newsletters, to inquire about available publications, or to book Jonathan as a speaker at your church fellowship or community group, write to Jonathan Gray, Post Office Box 3370, Rundle Mall, Adelaide, South Australia 5000.